Hi, and welcome to this live reading from A High Performing Mind. Strengthen your mind and live your best life by Andrew D. Thompson. And this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Introduction. From weakness to strength. My eyes sprang open. The room was pitch dark. Something wasn't right. I glanced at the clock on the nightstand. It was 2 a.m. It took me a minute to get my bearings and remember I was at a mediocre hotel not far from where I would be coaching a bunch of junior athletes at a national tournament the following day. But more importantly, something definitely did not feel normal. I had this strange vibrating sensation in my chest and I felt unusually weak. I could barely lift my arms and legs. A wave of fear gripped the pit of my stomach. I slowly sat up in bed and immediately decided to abandon the 3-day fast that started just a day and a half earlier. I had fasted a handful of times over the years simply because I felt it was healthy for the body, and I had coordinated this fast to coincide with my drive to the tournament. I had only done 36-hour fasts in the past, but this time decided to go for it and see if I could make it a full 3 days. Clearly, life had other plans. My mind fixated on the feeling that I should eat something as soon as possible. I crawled out of bed and looked around the room, only finding a bag of almonds and some water. I grabbed a handful and started chewing away, but it was quickly obvious the almonds weren't going to cut it. Feeling lightheaded with a pounding headache and still profoundly weak, I got dressed, which was a colossal effort. I headed outside to find more to eat and spotted a fast food restaurant across the parking lot. Thankfully, it was open 24 hours. I sat down at a table, my head spinning. The dining room seemed somehow darker than it should have been, and it was hard to focus. What is going on? I waited for what felt like an eternity for my egg and cheese sandwich while wondering when I would feel better. The sandwich did little to help, so I headed back across the parking lot to my room, hoping I could sleep it off. When I woke up a few hours later, it was finally light out, but I still felt terrible. An innate sense that I needed to eat something gnawed at me again, but I couldn't figure out what. I eventually decided some orange juice might do the trick. Maybe my blood sugar is low or something. I got into my car, still feeling awful, and drove in a random direction. I found a local convenience store nearby and stumbled in and bought some juice and a couple other snacks, hoping this would reset my energy levels. But when I returned to the car and drank the juice, nothing changed. I still felt weak and completely out of it. Now I was seriously concerned. As I got in the car and started back toward the hotel, I didn't get far before that vibrating sensation returned with a vengeance. This time, though, I started to feel it throughout my arms, and my fingers began to cramp and uncontrollably curl into fists. I could barely open my hands. Panic rolled in like a wave hitting my chest. What the hell is happening to me? Any vestige of denial that something was seriously wrong evaporated. I needed help, and I needed it immediately. I managed to pull over, but by now I was having immense trouble concentrating. Hunched over with my head pressed against the steering wheel, I dialed 911. They arrived quickly, put me on a stretcher, and took me to the local hospital just a few minutes away. In the hallway waiting area, I lay curled into a ball on a gurney, lightheaded and unsure if I would lose consciousness. My breathing was labored, and I felt like I couldn't get enough air. I had no idea why. The doctors didn't seem to be any more clued in than I was to what was going on. They ran a bunch of tests, including some blood work, while I lay there in intense distress. I couldn't believe how weak I felt. After I spent a few hours lying there alone, focused on my breathing and willing myself through this unexpected nightmare, the doctor returned with a report. One of my blood markers, phosphate, came back unusually low. While they couldn't figure out why, they placed a phosphorus drip into my vein to bring me back to normal levels as quickly as possible. They monitored me for the next 12 hours to ensure I was stable before I was finally released. Given no history of anything similar, the doctors and I chalked it up to the fasting. They were quick to tell me that starving myself for 36 hours was a terrible idea, and not to do anything like that again. I didn't need any convincing and silently vowed my fasting days were over. The next day, I woke up relieved to feel more and less normal. I spent the day coaching and figured the doctors were right. The fast was to blame and the situation was behind me. I hit the road at the end of the day and made the 3-hour drive back home. I assumed the whole thing was a bizarre one-off incident, but I was wrong. What I experienced was just the beginning of the worst year and a half of my life. The following day, I woke up and went to work as I would have on any regular Monday morning. Within an hour or two, though, after walking up a flight of stairs, I started to feel incredibly weak again, only this time the symptoms I'd experienced before were even worse. My heartbeat was weak, and the intense vibrating was back in my arms and chest, spreading up into my face this time. My hands began curling uncontrollably inward again, and the world darkened and receded. Again, I struggled to breathe normally, and my coworker, who could see that something was catastrophically wrong, asked me what he should do. I told him to call an ambulance. It was 10 terrifying minutes before they arrived, and it felt like an eternity. Again, they took my vitals, and again I was strapped onto a stretcher and taken to the hospital. By the time I was finally seen, I could barely gather my thoughts. My speech was slurred as I did my best to relay the events from the last couple of days. They ran similar blood tests, which came back with an alarmingly low phosphate level of 0.19 millimolecules per liter. It was a life-threatening drop the doctor said he'd never seen before in his 10 years of working in the emergency department. Fortunately, they started taking things a lot more seriously from then on, and I was quickly administered another phosphorus IV. Within a couple of hours, my breathing finally evened out, and the sense of imminent danger had begun to fade. I later learned that the low phosphate levels put me at risk of sudden heart and respiratory failure. Worst-case scenarios raced through my mind. I worried this was the end of me, and I'd never see my family again. The doctors admitted me to the intensive care unit to monitor me more closely. I called my wife to tell her what was going on. Despite phosphate pills and the IV drip, I still had numerous episodes of life-threateningly low phosphate levels. It turns out that phosphate is one of the most essential elements in our bodies. It controls all energy production, and when it gets low, vital organs like our kidneys, heart, brain, and lungs start to shut down. The next few days in the ICU were an emotional roller coaster ride. I was so weak most of the time that I couldn't stand without assistance. My family took shifts, staying with me to help me through my days. I had repeated waves of breathing difficulties, and I remember lying there willing and praying my heart would keep beating. I was put through a battery of tests, but nobody seemed to know what was going on, or more importantly, why. I was confused and afraid. How could this be happening? Just a few days before, I'd been doing 400-meter sprints at the track, and now this? Even though I was in my early 40s at the time, I was still in extremely good shape. I regularly exercised 1 to 2 hours a day, a long-standing habit from my younger years as a professional athlete. My mind couldn't comprehend how I could go from that to feeling like I might die at any moment in such a short span of time. I oscillated between feeling like I was at death's door and being sure I'd wake up the next day feeling completely normal. As far as I was concerned, this whole thing shouldn't be happening. After about 4 days in the ICU, armed with pills and containers for tests, I was sent home. Rather than being a relief, getting back home was a massive reality check that painted a picture of a bleak future. I had to crawl up the stairs to reach my bedroom because I was so weak. When I finally made it to the top of the stairs, I lay there panting. It took over 20 minutes to catch my breath from the effort. Despite all this, my denial held firm. I was sure my recovery would just be a matter of time. But this couldn't have been farther from the truth. I spent the next 4.5 months lying in bed upwards of 22 hours a day. I remember being so weak that I couldn't handle someone raising their voice at me or having an intense conversation without needing to lie down for a few hours to recover. I also remember feeling so terrible that I couldn't make it downstairs to celebrate my son's 3rd birthday. It was devastating to miss something so important. Over those first few months, depression set in hard, and I wallowed in the fear that I'd never recover. I cried almost daily over everything I'd lost, afraid I would never be physically active again or be able to financially support my family. I felt imprisoned in the shell of a body that was incapable of functioning normally. I saw a dozen different specialists and heard as many theories, but none seemed to definitively explain why my body wouldn't absorb phosphate properly anymore. I eventually gave up on the medical system and decided I'd have to find my own way out of this health crisis. I began reading everything I could on low phosphate conditions, including the latest scientific research papers. On top of this, I also started monitoring my diet and looking for patterns across days when I felt better or worse. Slowly, over many months of intense scrutiny and documenting everything I ate, I started to develop an eating protocol to manage my condition. During this time, I drew heavily on the discipline and mental strength I had developed from my years of competing in sports. Through sheer determination, I was able to return to work for 1 to 2 hours a day after those initial 4.5 months of being mostly bedridden, despite being so debilitatingly weak that I could barely get up out of a chair at times. I slowly built on this as I gained more insight into what food choices helped and what caused me problems. 2 hours a day at work eventually turned into 3, then 4, and so on. I was very fortunate that everyone was so supportive and helpful to me through those challenging months. By the year-and-a-half mark, I was back to regular 8-hour days. However, I still had to contend with a host of terrifying symptoms, including life-threateningly energy lows, uncontrollable body shakes, intense bouts of chest and kidney pain, mental fog, difficulty concentrating, burning sensations throughout my body, and frequent gasping to breathe properly, and feeling like I couldn't take in enough oxygen to stay conscious. There were many emergency trips to the ER and times when I was unsure I would even make it through the day. My phosphate lows became so familiar to me from being tested so often that I could accurately predict what my blood levels would be before my results came back from the lab. Throughout this, the doctors still, unfortunately, had no solutions. But, fortunately, over the next 3 years, I found more ways to manage my condition through diet and discipline. I still had harrowing energy lows, but I identified certain foods that were rich in phosphate, which helped me stay more stable. I wouldn't be able to exercise or exert myself safely much beyond a resting heart rate without severe symptoms for another 7 years, but thankfully, I could work again and support and care for my wife and kids. The extremely strict diet I followed to maintain my energy levels radically improved my health over those first few years. It included no sugar consumption because of the inflammatory effect, other low inflammatory food choices, and eating what might be considered dinner for breakfast and something light for dinner. I had much more energy this way. I also no longer drank alcohol, and everything I ate had to be plain to avoid unexpected reactions from unknown ingredients and seasonings and sauces. I learned to sleep propped up to help my organs metabolize nutrients. Otherwise, my body wouldn't get the phosphate it needed, and I'd feel awful the next day. It turns out that gravity plays a big role in making it easier to break down food into the required elements. For the longest time, watching TV or playing video games made me feel terrible. When you feel normal, it's hard to appreciate, but these things elicit emotional reactions, stress, and body tension that impact our energy levels. I was so weak that this type of emotional exertion could leave me feeling exhausted and shaky for hours. It was easy to get caught up in my fear and feel discouraged by all the setbacks and failures I endured, and I did get caught up in these repeatedly. Negative thoughts and emotions haunted me daily. I struggled to see how I would ever be able to extricate myself from the quagmire I found myself drowning in. I was determined, though, to eventually recover and not let the illness define me or convince me that there wouldn't be some light at the end of the tunnel. I became incredibly attuned to my body because it was so sensitive and reactive to everything. This vigilance was required for years, but it all contributed to reestablishing a relatively normal life as I slowly started to regain normal function. I was far from high performing at this point, but I was determined to one day fully recover. If it hadn't been for the healing diet I carefully crafted over those years, designed to optimize energy production and cleanse my body of toxins, I might still be bedridden. I am consequently a big believer in Hippocrates' famous words, "Let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food." It was the hardest thing to go through, but I stayed focused on recovering and knowing a better and more normal future was possible. Though my next 5 years were punctuated with severe symptoms, there were positives, even if they weren't apparent at first. Dealing with intense symptoms and feeling awful daily led to having the confidence that I could handle pretty much anything that came my way. Before the phosphate condition, I wouldn't have thought of myself as mentally weak, and I don't think anyone else would have either, given the self-discipline and determination I'd always had to achieve my goals. Managing through a life-threatening health condition did, however, take things to the next level. The experience made me mentally stronger, more appreciative, more compassionate, and a more capable human being in many ways. Over time, my resilience increased, and I discovered higher levels of personal discipline I didn't know I had. I became more adept at managing stress, fear, and the emotional lows from my now regular health setbacks. I learned to do my best even when I could barely focus, was in debilitating pain, or felt like I couldn't breathe in social situations, at work and during meetings and presentations. I also had to become more resourceful because I was forced to continually find ways to adapt to my new limitations and still perform while feeling terrible at work and at home. Fortunately, from the time I was a teenager, I had been obsessed with always performing at my best and finding the most effective mental approaches to excel, overcome adversity, and make lasting improvements in my life. These insights, along with the many life lessons I'd learned competing as a professional athlete and coaching elite performers, were the foundation that got me through this period of my life. My health crisis took things to the next level and required me to learn more. It showed me how to have a stronger mind and deepen my understanding of what it takes to get through challenging moments, stay focused on what's important, and live in a happier and more meaningful way. These experiences made it clear that although life is rarely easy, there's usually no straight line to success. There are simple, proven steps we can take to overcome the things that hold us back so that we can achieve our goals and live a better, happier, and more rewarding life. I came to see that getting through a prolonged health crisis was similar to what I'd learned and lived as a high-performance coach, business leader, and athlete. Life wasn't cooperating with my plans, and it had hit me hard. I was confronted with a bunch of unexpected hurdles I had to overcome to continue living the life I wanted. In a similar way to how I had to apply myself when I wanted to excel in sports, school, or in business, I now had to develop the skills and know-how I needed to reach my goal of full recovery. My illness taught me how to apply the same principles in every area of my life, even though the most difficult times. It took years to get back to feeling normal. I failed often along the way, but fortunately made it to the much better place in the end. The problem: life can be hard. There can be setbacks, failures, unexpected challenges, and unwanted circumstances. It isn't always apparent how to succeed, find clarity and a sense of purpose, or understand what it takes to live in a better, happier, and more rewarding way. There can be a host of obstacles that can stop us in our tracks, like negative thinking, self-sabotage, hurtful or discouraging words from others, fears, setbacks, nerves, failures, and the occasional disaster, to name just a few. There are also societal factors stacked against us. The world we live in today is full of impressive technological advances aimed at enhancing our lives in a multitude of ways and allowing us to enjoy a variety of modern-day conveniences. Some of these technological conveniences, however, also come with unintended consequences that negatively impact our strength of mind, emotional resilience, and ability to work productively toward improving our lives. It's no secret that social media robs us of our free time because it's so compelling to our brains. It has also been shown to lower self-esteem and create unrealistic perceptions of other people's success and happiness. Inventions like AI, the internet, and GPS are remarkable. They bring nearly the sum total of human knowledge to our fingertips, providing almost any answer and can do our work for us. But they also reduce our capacity to remember details and figure things out for ourselves. These technological advances also atrophy our independent, creative, and critical thinking skills. I can think of countless times when I elected to spend excessive hours watching TV, browsing the web, or getting lost in social media, instead of doing something that would have improved my life experience. There's nothing inherently wrong with these pastimes, of course, but it's all about moderation. Exercising, working on a hobby, passion, or skill, going for a walk to think and clear my head, spending time with someone I cared about, or putting more time into finding ways to make some extra money are all choices, among others, that would have been life-enhancing instead of depleting. The world has become far easier for us physically as well. We often don't have to walk as much or climb stairs. We have electric bikes and scooters, and so much of our work is now automated. These things have their undeniable benefits, but unfortunately, they also lead to the decline of our physical health and well-being. There are even subtler impacts on our strength of mind from our electronic devices. They eliminate our need to wait for things or endure the discomfort of boredom. And they occupy our attention to the point where we ignore loved ones and opportunities to do meaningful things. This reduces the time we might have taken to contemplate the direction of our lives, and also leads to the desire for instant gratification, which erodes our personal will and self-discipline and increases our preference to choose ease and entertainment over activities and pursuits that truly enhance the quality of our lives. Needless to say, there are many obstacles standing in the way of our ability to create the life we truly want. But there are people who rise above and do it every day. Fortunately, we can learn to use our minds like these high performers and take simple steps to improve our circumstances and the way we feel achieve our goals, and find greater levels of happiness and success in our lives. How this book can help. I developed the 12 attributes of high performers and wrote a high-performing mind based on my observations and experience over 3 decades of working with high performers and the additional insights gained from overcoming a life-threatening health condition. This book is designed to empower you with a proven system of simple steps to achieve your goals and improve your life, no matter your circumstances. Integrating these attributes will strengthen your mind and enable you to become high-performing and excel at anything you do. Your mind dictates how you feel and how you respond to each thing that happens to you every day. When your mind isn't strong and resilient, negativity can dominate your thinking processes and emotions. This leads to being reactive, increases self-doubt, and can erode your confidence. As a result, you end up taking what people say and do personally, and it becomes much harder to find positive and creative solutions to your circumstances. Not being in control of your mind can make life feel overwhelming and lead to a fear-based decision-making, missed opportunities, and a tendency to say and do things we regret later. It also makes it difficult to overcome complacency and procrastination and put in the needed effort to be focused, productive, and get the results we need to achieve our goals. Having a high-performing mind is critical for your success and happiness. If conversations don't go well, or you perform poorly in your pursuits, in competition, on an exam, during an important meeting or presentation, or in your relationships, life doesn't go as well, you don't feel happy, and you don't enjoy your life the way you could. On the other hand, when your mind is strong and high-performing, you have clarity about what you want and where you're headed. You have discipline in the empowering mindsets and habits to work toward your goals and what's important to you on a daily basis. You are powerful and consistent. You are resilient, focused, and productive. You respond to people in challenging circumstances from a place of calmness and confidence. You can manage any emotion and find positive and creative responses in any situation. You live in the present moment. You understand how to manage your nerves and fears, and you know how to access your best when you need it. When you have a high-performing mind, you achieve the results and outcomes you're striving for, which leads to achieving your goals and living a better, happier, and more rewarding life. In short, you become a more powerful and capable human being. Having a high-performing mind can be defined as having the ability to make the most of any situation and achieve the best possible outcomes in your life. Being high-performing means becoming a stronger and more capable version of yourself and living up to your highest potential. A high-performing mind will show you how to find clarity and purpose and increase your focus and resilience. It will enhance your ability to respond constructively and positively to people, challenging situations, failures, and setbacks. It will show you how to develop your discipline, conquer procrastination, and strengthen your emotional armor. You will also learn how to excel in your pursuits, expand your mental skills and capabilities, and overcome your doubts, nerves, and fears. You will find out how to identify the obstacles that block you from succeeding and how to perform at your best when it matters so you can get better results, achieve your goals, feel more confident, and make lasting improvements to your life. My personal experience and my work with many remarkable high performers in sports, business, and life over the years have helped me understand that it's possible to find our best responses during our most difficult moments, and as a result, to achieve better experiences in our lives. When you have an empowering and high-performing mind, regardless of the external circumstances, you can improve how you feel and keep yourself focused on the outcomes you're striving for so you can thrive in your life. It's not only about how you perform in life when things are going well, but how you rise to the occasion when you encounter adversity. This is what separates high performers from everyone else. If you've ever performed below your expectations, had something important not work out the way you hoped, failed to reach a goal, or struggled with your health or relationships, or if you've been stopped by fear, blocked by nerves, pulled down by negativity, discouraged by hurtful comments, or sidelined by unexpected life-altering setbacks and feel like you should be doing better in your life, then you're in the right place. And the chapters ahead will progress through a series of simple and proven steps to provide you with the empowering mental tools, life-changing habits, and insights to expand your capabilities and develop a high-performing mind. These tools and cognitive skills are designed to retrain your mind, strengthen your weaknesses, improve the way you approach and respond to situations, people, and your circumstances, get better results, and most of all, keep you focused on the things that matter. This will lead to better outcomes each day, achieving more of your goals, feeling happier and more confident, and living a more fulfilling and rewarding life. How it all started. My first lesson on how to succeed came from my dad, whose main message when I was a kid was to always work hard. Thanks to this lesson, along with my natural desire to excel and a willingness to put in whatever time and effort was necessary to get the results I was looking for, I had some initial successes. While my dad's advice helped me to a point, I still struggled with setbacks, failures, and an inability to achieve certain outcomes I wanted. It became clear that hard work wasn't the whole equation. I needed something more to consistently perform at my best and find the success I was striving for. I became passionate about finding ways to get ahead. I also wanted to understand the root of what was holding me back. When I started coaching, I found that the same obstacles that held me back also kept my athletes from achieving the success they wanted. I wanted to know what people who excelled in their lives did to consistently get the most out of themselves and live up to their potential. What did they do differently than everyone else? This line of questioning led to my fascination with peak performance. I wanted to achieve my goals and help others do the same. So I read every book, article, and scientific study I could find on the science of change, personal transformation, and peak performance. This research expanded beyond sports into any pursuit where I noticed someone accomplishing extraordinary things. I wanted to understand how the minds of high-performing people worked and how they adapted their particular circumstances to achieve success. What were their thought processes? How did they navigate through their fears, failures, and moments of doubt? How were they able to find positive responses to adversity and change themselves, and sometimes even the world around them, in profoundly beneficial ways? Through this lifelong dedication to achieving excellence in my own pursuits, in combination with my research, experimentation, and work with high performers in sports, business, and life in general, I came to identify the most common characteristics they all shared. In addition to the above, going through my own personal and health-related challenges helped me see things more deeply and expand my understanding further. I came to see that many of these insights, mindsets, and approaches could also be applied to areas outside of sports, school, and business. When I started applying these approaches and tools in my own life, my interactions with others gradually improved. I became less insecure and more confident, and I spent more time finding creative solutions rather than fixating on whatever problems I was facing. I felt more emotionally resilient and spent less time being unhappy and stuck in negative thinking patterns. In addition, I started to access my best more often and more consistently, and enjoyed better results in my pursuits. It all led to living a much happier life with far greater success. What to expect? You will learn how to integrate the 12 attributes of high performers through 32 simple mental tools that will provide you with the life-changing perspectives, approaches, mindsets, and empowering habits that anyone can use to live in a better, happier, and more fulfilling way. These tools can be applied to anything you experience and wish to improve or succeed in, from sports to business or school, and to your health, pursuits, and personal life. At the end of each chapter, you'll find Let's Make This Stick sections, which will ask you a series of questions so that you can apply the lessons right away. By the end of the book, you will have created a simple, step-by-step, personalized action plan and acquired key mental tools to improve the way you live and make lasting improvements in your life. Each chapter in this book can be thought of as part of a path up a nearby hill. You start off with the base, and each section gradually takes you higher and provides the mental tools necessary to reach the next milestone. At the top, you achieve a high-performing mind and become a stronger and more capable version of yourself where you live up to your highest potential. I suggest reading the chapters in order and practicing each tool before moving on. There's no need to rush. Take your time and make sure to integrate the new lessons and tools before you progress to the next chapter of the climb. Yes, some of the concepts may be familiar, but it's about taking action, practicing, and applying the mental tool consistently, not just knowing the theories. A high-performing mind is about training your mind so these attributes become ingrained habits and ways of thinking and being as they are for high performers. Worthwhile pursuits in life take some time and effort to achieve, and there are usually challenging moments along the way. Reading this book will be no different. You will encounter some ideas and concepts that will take time and repetition to understand, integrate, and apply. Those who persevere will make it to the top of the hill and benefit the most. A high-performing mind is an investment of your effort into having a permanently better and brighter future. A high-performing mind will also challenge your critical thinking skills. While nearly every lesson and tool in the pages ahead is supported by a wealth of scientific research and the latest innovations in peak performance and psychology, they are also founded in common sense thinking. It's my hope that you will vet these tools, habits, and mental approaches and determine how they work best for you. People often decide whether something is valid based on who has suggested it before they consider the quality and accuracy of the information being delivered. I suggest switching this around as you read A High-Performing Mind. Take in the information, consider whether it has value, try it out, and see if it works for you. Keep it if it does, throw it aside if it doesn't. Every story shared before each lesson is in A High-Performing Mind is true, with only slight deviations if I didn't recall something exactly or attempted to inject a little flow or humor. I have also changed the names and identifiers of the people referenced in the stories ahead to protect their privacy. The stories, however, are etched in my memory the way I have related them. It's my sincere hope that you'll find things of value in this guide that will help you on your journey to a better life experience. The first step of our journey naturally begins in the first section of the book, The Foundation. We're not going to get far without having clarity about what we truly want and strengthening our willpower. You also need a few tools to get started and boost your motivation and determination, improve your discipline and resilience, and show you how to overcome procrastination. You will benefit by having the empowering attitude to always do your best, the open-mindedness to improve a little bit each day, an understanding of how to make the most of setbacks and failures, and a strong mind that has the power to choose constructive responses over chronic negative thinking. We'll start building these foundational high-performing attributes in Chapter 1, which will introduce you to 4 important and practical mental tools that you may already be familiar with, but may not use optimally. They are meant to motivate you and ensure your success on this journey. Get ready to harness the power of your desire and conquer procrastination. Then we'll find out exactly what dirty discipline is and how small and simple steps can dramatically improve your life. Let's get started.